So now we're going to load our assets when you click on a collection. So we have this list of collections that are being pulled from OpenSea, and if you click on one, I want to then make a call, get all the assets that are in that collection, or all the assets that you own in that collection, and load those below. And I want to load those each with the last price that they were sold at, so that basically the price you bought it at. And that will give you a comparison of what you bought for versus what the floor price is for that collection. So to do that, we're going to have an on-click action on this collection div. And I always like to set the cursor to pointer, just so that you have a visual cue when you mouse over like this that tells you that this area can be clicked. And the event is going to be on click. And we'll create a new flow and call it get assets for collection. And what we're going to do here is make another API call to the OpenSea API. And for this one, we're going to use the retrieving assets call. So we can just copy this URL now. But basically for this call, you're going to pass it a owner parameter, which is our wallet ID again. And then we want to pass it a collection slug. So this bottom one down here, this collection is just a slug that's returned in the previous call that lets you know what the name of the collection is basically, or the ID of the collection, the unique ID that you can use to make other calls like this. So we want to tell it for our specific wallet and the collection that was clicked on, give us all the assets. And I will use the order by as well, because I want to order by sale price. So you can see here it says sale price is the last sales total price. That's what we want. So I want the cheapest items basically at the top. And so we will use order by sale price, and then the order by direction is going to be ascending instead of descending. So let's go ahead and set that up in Builder. Since we already have a flow on our home page, get collections for wallet, I'm actually going to copy this and we'll paste it into our collection row page. So we go to flows here and we can say paste copied flow. We'll hit that and that'll paste the whole flow in. Oops, I can delete this other one that I created. There we go. And we can change the name for this one. So get assets for collection. And this just saves us some time from having to do a bunch of duplicate work. So the URL we can paste in from OpenSea. So this is now going to assets. We know the parameter name is owner this time. And the page where the variable is on our root page, because now we're on our collection row page. So when we're making references to variables that we have set on the home page, we want to use root page. So owner will be that wallet. As I mentioned, we want to use order direction. Or first we want to use order by. So our first parameter will be order by sale price. And then we want to set order direction. There we go. Order direction. And this is ascending. We want to set our collection. So collection. And this one is going to be from a variable. And since we're on the collection row, we can actually access the variables that are in each collection item. As you remember, that's how we set the collection name and the floor price. So we're going to do the same thing here. The variable is on the current page, and this is called slug. And you can see that if you look at the results if you go back to the results from our last lesson, when you make a call and get your collections back, each collection has a item called slug. So we're going to use that. And let's just look and see if there's any other parameters we forgot to set. Owner, order by, order direction, collection. Let's go ahead and set a limit. And I'll just set this to, I think the max is 50 if I'm not mistaken. So let's try that. All right, so that should work just fine. We want to save the response as a variable. We'll save it on the current page, and we'll call this variable just collection. And then we'll keep this set value action here, and this time we want to set the value on our assets grid list. And the variable is on the current page, and we just called it collection. And actually, I want to change that. Let's call this assets. That makes more sense because that's what we're getting. All right, so the variable on the current page will be called assets. It's going to load by the collection slug, ordered by sale price, ascending with our wallet ID. So that's our flow, get assets for collection. Now let's make sure that we set that to our onClick. So on our div, onClick event, we're going to call get assets for collection. Now, we are getting the assets from OpenSea, we're setting them into the grid list, but we're not actually displaying them yet. And that is because we need to go into our asset row and tell it to pull these variables into our elements. So we'll do the same thing we did on our collection row, but we'll do it on our asset row. So the first thing we want to do is load the image, and we can do actually, if you click on the asset object in the documentation, we can see here, there's an image URL, there's a name, there's last sale, so we can see what those sort of top level objects are, and we can use those in Builder to set our variables. So on our image, in the data tab, we're going to say from variable, and we'll just use that image URL that we just looked at. Asset name, this will be from a variable, and this will be called name. And I'm actually going to stop here. We'll test this out because last price is going to take a little bit more work to get set up right and formatted, and I want to kind of talk through that separately. So first, let's pause and test and make sure that we're getting our images and our names every time we click and it's loading the collections. So I'm going to refresh. We're going to do connect to MetaMask. It's signing me in. Now it's loaded all my collections. I'm going to click on a collection, and it's not making the API call. So let's look and see what we did wrong. And I like to work backwards. So let's backtrack and take a look. So on click, we're calling get assets for collection. This is making an API call to OpenSea assets. We're passing the wallet ID, passing all of the parameters we need, setting it into the right grid list, and I think this is why. the path, let me take a step back. We need to test the API call in the OpenSea documentation so we can see exactly what our results will be. So if we go back, let's go here. Let's go retrieving assets. And I'm just going to paste in my owner ID. So let me grab that. That's my wallet ID. And I'll put in a collection. I'm just going to use Galactic Apes. That is my favorite collection right now. All right, so if we pop all that in and hit try it, we can see what the result looks like. And here's the mistake I made. I was assuming that the result was going to be an array. It's actually an object. And inside of that object, we have a array called assets. And this is what we want to access. And that's why it's not working. So in Builder, under my, where the current variable is, assets, I need to add a path. And that path is assets. So I know it's a little confusing. I just named my variable assets. This variable could be named anything. I set the name of it here in the save response as variable. This could be called whatever. It could be called OpenSea response. But I still need to access this first object here, which is an array, actually called assets. And so that's what this path is doing. So this is why we stop and test throughout the process. And hopefully that was a helpful little example for you of how to sort of retrace your steps, figure out what you're doing wrong. The key is I should have been looking at that response from OpenSea instead of just assuming I knew what the response was. All right, so I've refreshed. Now when I click on my collection, it makes the API call. And I can see it's loading all of my tokens in this collection, and we've got our image and our name set properly. So now that's working as we expected. The last thing we want to do is set the last price. So in order to do this, we're going to go back to our response, and we're going to scroll down in one of these assets, and we'll see here there is a object for last sale, and inside of last sale there's a total price. So this is the price that it was last sold at. One thing that I know about OpenSea and just the way that these work, if you minted the token instead of buying it, you won't see this last sale object. It'll actually be, you'll see last sale, but it'll be set to null. And I know that just from exploring other tokens in my wallet. So what I want to do is first check to see if last sale is not null, meaning if there is a last sale. Then I want to grab this total price, but you'll see here this total price is some long number that doesn't look like an ETH price. The default for OpenSea is it's setting 18 decimal places, basically. So this really should be 1.9, and I don't need all the extra zeros on there. And so I know this should be 1.9. I can see here, if I scroll down and look at all these, they all are set to 18 decimal places. So I'm basically going to just take this value and divide by a 1 with 18 decimal places, and that should give me the value that I want. So I can show you how to do that, but first we need to check to make sure that last sale actually exists. So we're going to do that with a condition, and then we're going to use we'll use some concatenation and some math to get this price. So let's go back. All right, so we're getting the assets for the collection. We're setting them into the grid row. The next thing we want to do is pull that last price. So what we're going to do is on our asset row page, we're going to create a new flow, and we're going to call this check last sale. And this is where we want to add our condition. So we're going to add an action, and we're going to search for a condition, and we're going to use compare values. And the value we want to compare is from a variable on the current page, and it's called last sale. And basically, if last sale is null, then we do nothing, meaning we won't try and load the last sale. But if it's not null, then we want to go to making a calculation and displaying our last price. So let's add another flow here, and we will call this one display last price. There we go. And let's go back to our check last sale. So we're basically going to compare last sale to null. And if last sale is empty, we'll do nothing. So action if true will stay blank. If it's not empty, so if the action is false, then we'll call this new flow we just created called display last price. So let's now go into display last price, and let's add an action here, and this one will be setting a variable. So we'll use set variable, and we want to create a variable called total price. So I'm just going to call this action set total price. I'll copy this. We want to set the variable on the current page, and we want to call the variable total price. So I'll paste that in there. And the value is going to be from the current page, last sale, and then a path, total price. So again, just as a refresher, what I'm doing here is first I created a condition. If last sale is empty, then we don't do anything. If it's not empty, we're going to pull last sale dot total price, or the path being total price, which is going to give us this value, and it's going to set this into a variable called total price. So that's good, but we can't use this value. It's too long. It's not clear. So this is where we'll add some math. So we're going to add a second action, and this will be our set value. We'll put a weight in between, and we want to set the last price text, and the value is going to be math. So now inside of this math value, we can pull variables and we can add some math. So you'll see here there are operators for add, subtract, divide, multiply. There's also a reference value with these square brackets. So if I hit the opening square bracket, it's going to open up a list of elements and variables. I want to use my total price variable that I just set. So I'm going to say total price divided by, and again, the value I'm using is just this 1 with 18 zeros, basically, because that's how many decimal places OpenSea's API is giving us. So now, when we go to display the last price, we'll first set this into a variable called our total price, and then we will divide by our value, and that should give us our nice little decimal value, and set that into this text for last price. So this action, check last sale, is what triggers all of that. The one thing we need to do before we forget is make sure we're triggering check last sale, and we're going to do that just on when this row loads. So on page load, we're going to add check last sale. I'll just nest this in here, and I'll go ahead and say wait after the page binding. So then we'll call check last sale that'll do the condition. If last sale is not blank, it's going to display the last price. So let's test that out. We'll refresh. We'll connect. It's going to load our assets. We'll scroll down to our test collection. And now when I click, you see that it loads all the assets, and it's loading the floor price, or I'm sorry, the last sale price. This is the floor price up here for the collection. But it's loading the last sale price for each, and I can see it's now properly formatting my decimals. So I can see my sale price. So we'll stop here for this lesson. In the next one, we will add some formatting, pretty this up a little bit. We're also going to add a check to see if the price that I bought the asset at is above or below the floor, and then we can change the color of the text or do something fun like that. So we'll do that in the next lesson.